Hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever in the world you are. Yesterday, we discussed some of the issues that was raised by Hopewell Chinono in the panel discussion he had with Professor Ibo Mandaza. I think there are many issues that we brought up in that discussion. So today, I would like to continue with that discussion and follow up on that one. What I is the main theme today is how people like Hopewell Chinono, he is a journalist, and on his website, on his X account, he advertises himself as an award-winning journalist, and can still say that Nelson Chamisa, given all the political shenanigans, corruption, and incompetence that he has shown, is still the best foot forward for Zimbabwe. This is what I find so amazing, and this is the main theme of today's discussion. And he's not the only one, to be fair to him, who have said that. Many other intellectual professionals have said the same thing. But it is shocking that if the intellectuals are so dishonest not to admit that somebody who has proven to be corrupt, incompetent, cannot at the same time be the best foot forward for the country, what more do you expect my uncle and nephew in the rural backwaters to think? So this is, I think, an interesting discussion, and would like to continue on it. I'd like to welcome Benjamin. Welcome, Benjamin.
Thank you for having me, and to our viewers, good day to you all.
Thanks, Benjamin, for being here. So let's listen to what Hopewell was saying here, and then we can take it from there.
Debates in political party. But because, as I said earlier, the opposition came into being because of a political crisis manifesting itself through economics, the citizens were willing to overlook that. And those issues have never been primary or central to debates in homesteads, whether someone has broken the constitution or not. As long as we like that person, breaking the constitution doesn't matter. And this is no different to ZANU-PF, where constitutions have been broken before so many times and had been broken before 2005. I'll give an example which Professor Mandaza is well familiar with. In 1984, at the Borodale Racecourse ZANU-PF Congress, the senior minister for political affairs at the time, Mr. Nyagumbo, won the position of deputy president in ZANU-PF. But Mugabe intervened to stop Nyagumbo becoming the vice president of the party and subsequently of the country, because he said, no, you can't do that to Mzenda. So these things are prominent in our history, where leaders intervene so that certain outcomes prevail over the majority. So what happened in 2005, it is Zimbabweanness in it, in that it had happened before. When this happened, the majority of the citizens, as I said, went with Morgan Tsvangirai breaking the constitution, because this is self-evident in the subsequent election results. Because they were pursuing one goal. The one goal is that we want to get rid of ZANU-PF. So the hatred for ZANU-PF has attracted all manner of people who are not necessarily democratic, but want to see the back of ZANU-PF. And I've always joked that, not wanting ZANU-PF does not necessarily make you a Democrat. It simply means that you want ZANU-PF to go. And as Professor Mandaza said in the introduction, we have a history of such political parties or behavior in Africa where they come in and they do the same thing as the previous ruling party was doing. So the critics of Morgan Tsvangirai were accused of being ZANU-PF, and they were accused of being CIO. They were accused of being sellouts. The same language that we see from the liberation struggle, the language that was used to get people killed, had found its way in the opposition discourse. So you found people like Trudy Stevenson, they were beaten up. Again, another Zimbabwean trait where you settle political arguments with violence. So the opposition was proving that it was not necessarily different in so many ways to ZANU-PF. It just wanted to get ZANU-PF out of the way because as citizens, we've always wanted ZANU-PF to go because of corrupt rule and so many things that were taking place. And after this split, we saw the emergence or the pronounced emergence of a kitchen cabinet, which was accountable to Morgan Tsvangirai and nobody else, where decisions were made outside the structures of the Movement for Democratic Change. Then it was now called Movement for Democratic Change, Tsvangirai, MDCT. And we saw Tsvangirai starting to recruit people who were compromised, people he was warned about at the time, people like James Maridadi, but he didn't listen again because the leader had so much power. He was able to do as he thought was right and good for the political party. And if you opposed him, you became a sellout. You became a CIO, a ZANU-PF agent within the political party. And then we went into the GNU after the violence, unnecessary violence that had taken place against Morgan Tsvangirai and his lieutenants, including people like Professor Blavmo Maduku. Again, this election was fraught with that Zimbabweanness of violence. People had their homes burnt down, and we ended up with a GNU. During this GNU, that's when I realized the hand of the state in counterintelligence, because Morgan was lied to. He was told that they want to kill you, and then he flew to I think it was first to South Africa, then to Botswana, where he stayed there. And yet what the regime wanted was him out of the way because they were afraid that if there is a figure that people can converge around, there could be a revolution of sorts or an uprising against the fake election results that had been put out. We all know after Mugabe then pronounced months later that Morgan actually won the election by 73%. But that's now a historical factor. But we also saw during that time a component of ethnic politics taking place, not just in ZANU-PF, but also in the MDC. And there was an attempt to get rid of Tendai Biti as finance minister. I hope those that will write books will document what actually happened. And of course, ZANU-PF realized this and it took advantage of it and it started creating cracks. There was also an element of that Zimbabwean component I was talking about where the opposition itself became too relaxed in this unholy alliance called the GNU. Some were involved in corruption. I remember Prime Minister Morgan Tsvangirai getting rid of Elias Mzuri because he was said to have been involved in fuel deals when he was energy minister. So we saw that element of Zimbabweanness where when people get power, they start to use power to accumulate personal wealth for themselves. And then, of course, we came to the 2013 election, with which I know Dr. Mandaza, you're very familiar with. The details that I'm going to say, some of them happened when you were there in Maputo, where the opposition was told not to take part, advised not to take part in the election of 2013, but they did not listen to the advice that was coming from SADC voices, including President Zuma. This I have it on the record. The point person who was
I'd like to pause just there for a few minutes to go back to the issue that Hopewell has highlighted there. I think the most important thing that he highlighted at the beginning is something that we mentioned yesterday, the problem with the Zimbabwean politics, where they focus on the individual instead of the ideology. But that is another serious weakness. But I also want, Benjamin, for you to focus on the issue of why is it that Hopewell has not mentioned what the GNU was about. I find that to be really shocking. What was the GNU about? Benjamin.
So, thank you. So, I believe, the GNU is one misunderstood topic. Like Hopewell rightfully said that, people thought with their stomachs rather than with their heads. They thought, a lot of people, I've asked a lot of individuals what they think the GNU was all about. And everybody will give you the answer to say to stabilize the economy, or most of people would say that, because given the fact, yes, that Zimbabwe was going through a lot of shortages and everything. Yes, stability was derived from the GNU, but the fundamental was to implement the democratic reforms, or the reforms that were needed, so such that the next time there would be even an election, there would be, due diligence procedure that would have been followed, that is different from the one that we are still experiencing right now in, like, for example, the past elections, 2023 elections. Those were the elements that we were supposed to be getting rid of. That was the fundamental importance, or the fundamental that brought about the GNU. And rightfully, Hopewell did mention to say SADC actually in 2013 told the NDC then.
Before we get to the 2013, I think it is important here to note that, like you correctly said, that some people believe it was to stabilize the economy. But, we are talking here of somebody like Hopewell Chinono, who is supposed to be an intellectual. The primary purpose of the GNU was to implement the democratic reforms, to stop the blatant vote rigging that had taken place, a repeat of the blatant rigging that had taken place. He mentioned it in the election of 2008. Morgan Tsvangirai had won 73%, but the regime blatantly cheated, cooked up the results so that Morgan Tsvangirai's 73% was whittled down to 47% to force their runoff. And then the runoff itself was marred by the wanton violence, the worst election violence that the country had ever seen. And even SADC and the AU could not ignore that. And hence the reason why they refused to give ZANU-PF legitimacy. And the primary purpose of the GNU was to implement those democratic reforms to stop the repeat of that. Why somebody like Hopewell Chinono would talk about the issue of the GNU and not mention that beggars belief. That is what I can't understand. And I think it should be the main issue here. You know, and his failure to mention it is really disappointing. This is one of the things that I find so infuriating about our so-called intellectuals. This is the primary purpose of the GNU. You should understand it more than the ordinary person in Zimbabwe. Why is he failing to say it? That is what I can't understand.
If I may add, you know, especially when we come to the subject of reforms, I think we are, even up to this day, we are giving it lip service. We just say, you know, just as a reminder, but nobody is really pushing that agenda. Everybody is in election mode at any given time. Everybody is campaigning at any given time. And then a few days after the elections, he has the whole story to say, you know, we need reforms. We were rigged. We need reforms. We cannot continue. But as we head towards any election, there's nobody that will talk about the need for reforms. It's we will win big. We will strive to win big, which is all just a big farce. It's all a big lie. It's a facade just to cover up. And I feel as if, you know, we are letting ourselves down as the people of Zimbabwe, because the reforms are fundamental to the democracy that we need. It's not about electing anybody. You can elect anybody. And without reforms that are implemented so that we can have, you know, democracy, that such that tomorrow, if this person gives us a raw deal or is not performing to the way that we want, we can easily remove, you know. But somehow we just water it down. It's like a whisper to say, oh, by the way, we need to talk about reforms. For me, I think it doesn't cut it. I think we are just selling ourselves short, and we are bound to regret this year mistake. Thank you.
Well, let's carry on with Walpole Chinono's analysis. He is now going on to the end of the GNU and is talking about the period when SADC called a special GNU, a special summit, SADC summit, to discuss whether Zimbabwe should go into the elections, the 2013 elections. We can listen to it and then we will comment on it.
Running all these things for President Zuma confirmed it, and Professor Mandaza, you were there in Maputo where these things took place. And for the first time, as documented by one of Zimbabwe's renowned scholars, Dr. Chamisa, we saw the hand of God, where Prime Minister Tsvangirai openly said, "I've been informed that, you know, God has touched my head, and that I'm going to win this election." So he went into an election on the premise, one of his lieutenants told him that God had said that, spoken to him that he was going to win the election. Of course, we know what happened. The election was rigged. Up to now, we don't even know how it was rigged. When I asked the opposition, they don't know how it was rigged. So it was time to regroup for the opposition. 2014, I think it was 2014, there was a Congress. We saw that Zimbabwean element again, now rigging elections, bringing in people that you want and getting rid of.
Okay, let's go back to the SADC summit in 2013, where they advised Morgan Tsvangirai and company not to participate in the 2013 elections. And according to Hopewell there, Morgan Tsvangirai went ahead and participated because he was told that the hand of God had touched him and he was going to win the elections. What is your comment on that one, Benjamin?
Well, for me, it's deja vu. I think I've heard that recently. Somebody stating, God is in it. I mean, it's just naive, and greed at the end of the day, and the foolish. It's just all foolish. I can't find the best word to describe such madness. I mean, here we are. We have ZANU-PF that has been rigging elections for so long, and a junior just comes and decides, I am going to take it on directly as it is. And yet, for years we've been asking SADC, and they have been asking SADC before, help us get rid of this. And here you are given a good opportunity, not once, but numerous times. Don't go into these elections as things stand. ZANU-PF will win. But for some reason, best known, I just don't get it. We as a people, look, I believe, yes, for example, now and then, Changira had the numbers. Chamisa has a lot of numbers. But as long as a system is operated by some individuals that can fine-tune it to suit their own, you stand no chance. Your numbers count for nothing. So that was the most sound advice from SADC in 2013. And we fast forward, let's fast forward. Just recent events. SADC came to our rescue again.
Yeah, before we go on to the next one, I think it is important there to put the record right. That yes, Morgan Tsvangirai, as much as he wants to claim that he participated in the 2013 elections because he believed that, or he was informed that he was going to win the elections because God was going to intervene. Even if we push that aside, the actual reason why he participated in those elections, why SADC also gave up on that call, because SADC had said to both MDC and ZANU-PF, the 2013 elections should be postponed until meaningful democratic reforms are implemented to stop the repeat of the 2008 elections. And initially, Mugabe agreed. He left Maputo saying that, yes, the elections will be postponed. It's only when he got back to Zimbabwe that the whole thing changed. In fact, the then Minister of Justice and Parliamentary Affairs, Patrick Chamisa, held a press conference at which all the diplomats from all the SADC countries were invited. And at that press conference, that is when ZANU-PF announced that they were not going to postpone the elections. And their reasons for it was, we cannot postpone the elections on the basis of we want to implement reforms, because there are no outstanding reforms. I am the Minister of Justice and Parliamentary Affairs, and I'm telling you now that Parliament is not sitting on reform proposals that have been tabled in Parliament. In fact, in the 5 years of the GNU, not even one reform proposal was ever submitted. And no one could dispute that. MDC guys could not dispute it because they also knew that they had not submitted any meaningful reforms. They had not submitted not even one reform. And SADC could not push for implement reforms. What reforms? So this issue of the failure by MDC to submit even one meaningful reform proposal in 5 years of the GNU is at the very heart of why the GNU was a total failure. Whether Morgan Tsvangirai would have insisted in, no, we want to postpone the elections, he could not expect SADC to back him on that point. Because SADC was saying you must implement reforms. And that is what they had said at the summit in Maputo. And when they learned that there were actually no reform proposals outstanding in parliament, what could SADC possibly say? And even MDC itself, if ZANU-PF had said to them, okay, what are the reforms? What reforms do you want us to implement? SADC, MDC had no answer to that. They'd never come up with a reform proposal that they could say, this is a reform proposal we want you to implement. It was all very vague. Or we want you to align the electoral laws with the new constitution. Which electoral law do you want us to align? Align it from what to what? They never came up with any of those concrete proposals. It is important, I think, as intellectuals, and this is what I keep coming back to, that intellectuals educate the people. For somebody to talk about the GNU, failed to mention that MDC had failed to implement even one meaningful reform, failed to mention that the SADC initiative to get the elections postponed because to allow for reforms to be implemented was abandoned because there were no reform proposals on the table, is inexcusable. This is what is the problem with our political discourse. If the intelligentsia are failing to come up with the facts, how do you expect the ordinary person in the rural areas to begin to understand what went on in the GNU? So, sorry, I think we are now nearly to the end. I was just going to play one more bit and then we can conclude, Benjamin.
Okay, sure.
Those that you don't want. Morgan Tsvangirai did not want Nelson Chamisa to become the Secretary General of the Movement for Democratic Change, Tsvangirai faction. And the reason was that he had been told that, oh, this young man will topple you. And this is not different from what people like Mugabe were being told in the past about people that were seen as popular, and in some cases seen as more competent than President Mugabe, and you would get rid of them. So that's how Monzora became Secretary General. Morgan Tsvangirai, I think the election was rigged in order to stop Nelson Chamisa and allow Monzora to come in, and Monzora became the Secretary General. But before that, there had been a fight, a discourse fight around change of leadership. And people like BT, Elton Mangoma wanted Morgan Tsvangirai to now present his plan for stepping down. But of course, Morgan Tsvangirai was not prepared for that. And we saw that BT and Mangoma had to leave the MDCT. I've been seeing some of the videos this week when they were being used to demonize Tendai BT as a traitor. Again, this is another Zimbabwean element. If I disagree with you, Professor Mandaza, I can call you a traitor. And if I've got a lot of supporters behind me, they will sing that song until it becomes real. And it's very unfortunate because this is the language that has been part of our political discourse from the 50s, where people like Joshua Ngomo were called traitors. People like Ndabaning Stole were called traitors. The very people that called them traitors declared Ndabaning Stole a national hero. When Ngomo was called a traitor, a snake that must have its head hit, again, the same people who called him a traitor declared him a national hero. And so we saw that, and we ended up with a situation where there was another split again. And then in 2015, there was illegal appointments that were made. But because they were made by a popular leader within the opposition, again, supporters said, no, what Save said must go. But I think I need to come back and address these appointments and give the listeners a certain nuance. The military has always been involved in politics in Zimbabwe, and even in post-2000 politics. A general went to see Morgan Tsvangirai and said, look, you're not feeling well. Your party is a very important institution in this country. Now, if anything happens to you, I'm not saying something is going to happen to you, but if anything happens to you, this party will now be taken over by a Ndebele woman. We cannot allow that to happen. You need to appoint someone. That's how Nelson Chamisa and Mzuri were appointed. Again, there were tensions in the party because there was an ethnic element in that. Morgan Tsvangirai was Karanga, Nelson was Karanga, Mzuri was Karanga. So essentially, the top.
Sorry, I think I'll stop it there because the bit I really wanted was when Hopewell comes back to this issue and saying Nelson Chamisa is the best foot forward for Zimbabwe at present. I find that to be absolutely ridiculous, given the political reality on the ground, that these individuals, MDC leaders, Triple C leaders, have proven beyond all reasonable doubt that they are corrupt, incompetent. This is a historic fact. How can then somebody, an intellectual, turn around and say the same individual who has already proven, we have got a track record showing that they are corrupt and incompetent, are the best foot forward for Zimbabwe? This is what I find so difficult to accept. I don't know whether you got the same message as well, Benjamin.
I agree with you there, but I would like to go to the part where, Hopewell is trying to explain or to emphasize the similarities that you found in MDC and you are still finding in Triple C right now, of the top leaders not following the constitution of their own party, let alone the constitution of Zimbabwe. This, if we cannot see, the death trap that is right in front of us now, I don't know what it will take for us to notice some of these things. it's rather scary at the end of the day that we are finding we are supporting these similarities just because of popularity. Yes, Chamisa is very popular, but to go on and to declare him, the best foot forward, what has he done to show that? We have to look at the merits, not just because a lot of people are following. Let's remember, the mob is always wrong most of the time. So I think if we continue on this path of where we just look at how popular somebody is, we are bound to make grave mistakes as we move forward. And we are not willing to learn, let me put it that way. We are not willing to learn.
Well, my comment to that one, Benjamin, would be if it's popularity based on ignorance, this is where the intelligentsia should come in, because they are there to educate the ordinary people, to explain to them what really happened, for instance, during the GNU, and that MDC leaders sold out. They failed to implement even one token reform. They failed to submit even one token reform proposal in 5 years because Mugabe had bribed them with the trappings of high office. And to show their appreciation, they kicked reforms into the tall grass. We cannot deny that. But the people need to be informed of things like that. If the intelligentsia are themselves sweeping those facts under the carpet, then you cannot blame the ordinary person to think that Nelson Chamisa is perfect. He's the best foot forward for the country out of ignorance. There is a cure for ignorance, knowledge. And if those who are in a position to impact that knowledge are not honest enough to deliver it, then society is in serious trouble. And that is really the main thrust of my comment on this issue.
Now, the problem I think that we are facing and we must take into consideration is, if you want to be popular, and that is the problem with a lot of Zimbabweans, popular trappings of high office, wanting greed, you just have to follow the guy that is popular, regardless of the fact that whatever he is talking, whether it be nonsense or be true. So for me, I find it very, very difficult to accept, like you are saying, that a lot of things have been omitted, especially when it comes to the guys who are holding on to this power. We say we have to put our foot down at some point and question some of the actions that they take, some of the decisions that they have taken, regardless of popularity. That is being in right standing. At least you have a clear conscience than just to follow through and try and get a few bits of crumbs that fall off from the master's table. That's what I think we should, as Zimbabweans, and you're right, as intellectuals. But then now in Zimbabwe, you find out that the intellectuals are the ones that are dancing, or they've been swallowed by the mob. So they are doing and behaving exactly like what your aunt and uncle in the rural areas would do. So which is now sad to say, who is going to teach who? And it seems as if the rural area uncle and aunt are the ones that are now teaching the slogans to the learned. So we have our priorities all wrong, unfortunately.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. So my personal closing remark would be, I think it is tragic that those in a position to educate the people, to inform them so that they can make the right decision based on facts, on knowledge, on reality, are selling out in the name of being popular themselves. We live in a country where the social media has become a battlefield where anyone who is seen to be saying the wrong thing or what is not popular, if you want, is verified, criticized right, center, and left. But the true value of intellectuals is that they should let the evidence lead them, follow where the evidence is going, maintain their position, stand firm on the facts. Sweeping facts underneath the carpet is not doing the nation any favor. And I don't think it's doing people, those intellectuals, any favors either. Because at the end of the day, people will be turning around and saying, well, you were speaking on GNU the other day, and you even failed to mention that MDC guys failed to implement even to submit even one meaningful reform proposal. What kind of intellectual are you? So I think this is an important issue. And I think in Zimbabwe, one of the reasons why the country is in a mess is that we have not allowed ourselves to be honest and go where the evidence goes. Some of it, to be quite honest, is actually common sense. There is no one with an education of anything above O level who can honestly say they do not understand what reforms are by now, if they really wanted to learn. And therefore, then they do not understand that the opposition have sold out in implementing those reforms designed to stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. After 23 years, there is no excuse for that. Thank you very much again, Benjamin, for the discussion, and I would like to thank the listeners there for listening and say good.
Thank you very much for having me, and to our viewers, thank you for joining us, and good night to you all.
Thanks again, Benjamin. I think tomorrow we will have probably pick a subject on current affairs. For discussion, and I hope that some of the people out there will be able to join us. And those who were able to join us, I would like to say thank you very much. And in future, if you really would like to join us, and we encourage you to join us in the discussion, we would like to hear what you have got to say yourself on the issues that we'll be discussing. Please do not hesitate to join us and use the link. I posted the link, and if anyone wanted it, if you put on your comment there that you want the link, I can also post it to you. But again, thank you very much, Benjamin, and thank you very much for listening, everybody, and good night.
Thank you. Good